Hello and welcome to In Service to Transformation with me, your host, Claire Darnell.
Hello.
Really happy today to introduce my friend, Alexis Lee. I was having a conversation with Alexis just before this and was saying, how would you like to be introduced? What do you do? Who are you? And we agreed that I would have a stab at this and I'm going to share my perception of Alexis. And I would say she almost can't be contained. She's a
Mhm.
constant changing, evolving being. I would definitely say Alexis is an activist, and her activism has showed in many, many different ways in the years that I've known her. And she's an author, a published author. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of that later in the episode. And she has a really powerful platform which she has used in a variety of ways, but every step of the way it's been deeply transformational, not only for myself, but for many, many others, thousands and thousands of others. And what I really admire about Alexis is her willingness to continually transform herself, and actually how that is a huge service to others. And yeah, I could think of no one better to invite to come and be in discussion with myself and for you, the listener. And I'm just hoping that, yeah, we can explore a little bit of Alexis's journey, and yeah, you're just going to find it yummy. So, hello, Alexis.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I really enjoyed that.
I'm sure you did.
Better than
It's
doing my own introduction anyway, because I always find that really difficult. So yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting to hear how others perceive me.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I guess I'm curious I just want to say thank you. I want to share some gratitude for your yes, for trusting me in this dynamic, this new venture. And yeah, for your trust. It means a lot to me. Um, and I'm excited to delve a little bit deeper around some of these topics because, as much as I know you, there are always layers and layers to friendship, to connection, to stories that perhaps we've not touched on previously. So yeah, I'm going to start off with, I guess, a question that actually, if I frame it, what I'm realizing is for many people, there isn't an aha moment, there isn't a rock bottom. There's just a constant state of self-observation and self-study and real self-realization that occurs for some. But I'm curious to ask, was there a defining moment for you when you thought, ah, I need something to change, or I'm seeking something more. I'm seeking some kind of transformation. And do you have a pivotal moment, or a moment, or a period of time that you can recollect where that began for you?
Um, I think you kind of like touched on it before, but I've got
Mm,
multiple moments that I can pluck out of the air. Um, I think this latest metamorphosis
mm,
um has been around 4 years in the making. I
mm,
think I think I'm on a cycle of 4 years. I think every 4 years I have some sort of major transformation or in a state of flux anyway, definitely. Um, it takes a while to kind of settle down again. Um, I think the moment was when I decided I wanted to leave my marriage. Having been together for 24 years, that was a really difficult decision for me. And it took me many, many years to make that decision. Um, but that was the start of a very big excavation let's say. And many, many dark nights of the soul followed that.
Yeah. I love how you touched on it took you many years to come to that decision. That's often the case, isn't it, with life-changing moments? The action obviously can happen fairly rapidly, but that process of transformation that underlies it can take a significant period of time, as you described. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would say I am a thinker,
Mm.
then a feeler, and then a doer. And it kind of has to happen in that way for me. And yeah, there's and depending on how big I perceive the decision or the change or the move, depends on how long that process takes.
Yeah. And yeah, and it's great when we can become a witness to our own process, because then we can almost predict, oh, I'm at this stage of the process and I know what comes next. And
Mm,
yeah, and
I'm not
leaving a
sure.
marriage.
I'm not sure I'll ever get that. I'm always surprising myself. There's always something new popping up and hitting me over the head.
Yeah. So what's hitting you over the head at the moment?
Oh, good question. What is not hitting me over the head? What's hitting me over the head at the moment? I mean, I'm quite self-analytical, I would say. There's a lot of analysis going on all of the time,
Mm.
and just sort of new layers being uncovered all of the time. And I mean, yeah, there's so many things actually. I'm thinking about abandonment, rejection. I'm thinking about sexuality. I'm thinking
Mm.
there's a lot of things, always. But I think one of the things that I am sort of wanting to delve deeper in is the um moving the thinking into the feeling a bit more. And I guess
Yeah.
that's what you do best, Claire. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, that's I'm sometimes I think being over analytical can be part of a disassociation
Yeah.
um practice, which I'm very, very well attuned to.
Yeah.
Um, so I would love to work a bit more on that and really feel into things. And maybe, try and allow the feeling to be my access point rather than the thinking first. And just play around with that a little bit. And also, how does the doing transform either the thinking or the feeling? So just kind of, yeah, this is all in a bit of a puddle on the floor at the moment that is being thought about.
Mm. Lovely. Thank you for that answer. And for those who can't, obviously this is a podcast, so what you can't see at the moment is Alexis's emotional support animal. A cat has jumped up on her lap at this precise moment and is demanding cuddles. And there's nothing better than a furry friend to force us into feeling, right? These lovely little sentient beings. And my cat also has come into the room and is like there safeguarding me in this process. And I just find it really, really interesting. So I absolutely loved what you touched on there about moving from the thinking to the feeling and how that can be a dissociative action and
Mm,
all of those pieces. And I think what I'm really keen to know about is your journey. So you've been in
mm,
this constant state of self-reflection and metamorphosis, and you have this 4-year cycle, and you touched on this last 4 years with your relationship ending and then moving forward. And I think you touched on exploring your sexuality currently, these things.
yeah,
So
and
I'm curious about, sorry, go ahead. What are you going to say?
sorry, when I meant sexuality, it
Mm,
wasn't really what is my sexuality. It was my
mm,
sexuality in general, just
mm,
feeling and um ex observing myself and where I am, and depending on my mood and my cycle and stuff like that. I'm thinking about that a
Oh,
lot.
yes. So again, moving into the somatic, the body, understanding how your body is responding to external forces and how it wants to just move through cycles in its own rhythm, right?
Yeah, yeah, and in relationship with another person, it's really interesting, I think, to observe how we react and how we co-create things. Um, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about at the moment. That's very present in my
Yeah,
being.
yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, but I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. I think there's going to be a little bit of that because we're always so full of ideas, right? And I welcome it. So thank you for your interruption. So yeah, I'm curious. So you'd sort of said at the moment or in the last cycle, these are the things that are happening for you. So your pathway to healing, I know, has been varied and you've obviously embarked upon lots of different ways of healing. So I'm curious as to the point that perhaps this last round of transformation, what's the journey been like from there? So what are the things that you've explored and which things have helped you to find this transformation and this self-awareness?
I think the one that springs to mind is when I was on a Kundalini retreat
Mm,
in Ibiza, and during just sort of at the end of one of the sessions, um, the facilitator does a sort of sound bath, and I suddenly started shaking. My whole body started shaking involuntarily, and I started getting visuals. I guess it's like doing mushrooms or acid.
yeah.
And not I have done mushrooms, but I haven't done acid. um, because it's scary. um, so yeah, I was getting all these visuals. My eyes were closed, but I was still awake and my body was shaking. And there was like these kind of shadows coming in, and you know, kind of faces and figures and animals, and yeah, it was a very, very, very trippy experience. And then I started crying uncontrollably, and I actually had to stop. I had to get up and I had to leave the room, because what I didn't want to happen is everyone to wake up out of their process and then see this absolute mess in the middle of them. And also, I didn't want people's eyes on me at that point. So I got up, went to my bedroom, and continued to shake, continued to cry. And it was almost like, to me, it felt like my soul was coming back into my body. And I would say from that moment on, I started feeling things again. And
Mm,
I had been very numb for many, many, many years.
mm.
And I haven't stopped crying since. Um, yeah, it was a very, very powerful experience, and one that has been incredible and also really quite hard too, because we disassociate for a reason, we numb for a reason.
Yeah.
It stops the highs and it stops the lows. And then when sort of feeling comes crashing back into, well, I'm speaking from my perspective,
Mm,
when my feeling came crashing back into my body, I felt like I was on this emotional roller coaster that I've never been able to actually get off again. Um,
mm,
and I like that. And I also had to grieve the old me that didn't have so many emotional sort of ups and downs.
yeah. So much in there.
Yeah.
That Kundalini awakening that can happen in a pure Kundalini environment, or actually in so many ways, we can sort of awaken that erotic eros energy that resides in each of us, and that awakening that opens us up from the inside out. So you touched on mushrooms and plant medicine just there a little bit, but actually the awakenings that we can have, the kind of shamanic opening that we can have using our own life force is something that always blows my mind. And yeah, you mentioned obviously you'd sort of done the groundwork through that retreat, and then at the end with this sound healing. And for me too, sound healing is profoundly medicinal. I have the most incredible journeys with sound. And yeah, when you explained about seeing the shadows come in and the faces and the figures, and I really understand how
Mm.
that can be a lot to hold initially. And the shaking, and but just almost like feeling like celebrating that, and just feeling like I'm so glad you had that awakening, that you were obviously ready, because in my experience these things come to us when we're ready for them.
Absolutely.
um
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen all crazy stuff. I have, an aunt that constantly comes to me in sound healing ceremonies, and
Mm.
I've communed with God. I've ran around with pixies and fairies. I've literally done like, I had one sound healing where myself and God were just spiraling around like,
Mm.
two souls. And there was, my aunt was in there, and she was like gold leaf. I can't explain it. And we were just,
Wow.
just all telling each other, it's all okay. This is how it is, And yeah, I think sound healing is a beautiful method of, my experience of it is it meets you where you're at and enables you on a cellular level to unlock what needs to be unlocked.
Yeah,
And it's not
definitely.
always the thing that we think we need to unlock, right? It's what
Yeah.
it's what needs unlocking. We're not always in control of that. Mm, yeah. So what happened next? You've had this awakening, spiritual awakening, as I would call it.
What happened next? I kind of went to my bed for a bit. I had some sort of aftercare from the facilitator who gave me, oh, I can't remember now what happened. Maybe some Reiki or something.
Mm,
Um, and then I just kind of felt very, very different ever since,
yeah.
really. And it's been a slow unraveling process of rediscovering the new me, I guess.
Mm,
That I feel like the divorce was the spark, and then that was the light that actually, set something on fire, and then there's been a kind of slow um burning of my old self into
mm,
my new self.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, so much has happened since then. That was like probably 3 years ago. So I feel like I'm just coming towards the end of this cycle.
Yeah.
I asked for a divorce just before my 40th birthday, and
Wow.
we are 14 days away from my 44th birthday. Lots of fours.
True to form, yeah.
So yeah. And I feel a bit more grounded at the moment, a bit more like I am meeting my new self. Um,
Mm,
and things are aligning. I mean, at the moment.
yeah, yeah, you're finding your
Because,
way.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
You mentioned that it kind of opened you up to feeling again, or and to being emotional and crying. Um, and so how have you managed that reintroduction back to that set of emotions? How do you find that shows up in your day-to-day life, and how do you work with those emotions?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think things move me now.
Mm,
I didn't before. I used to be able to, watch the most grisly of
mm,
crime documentaries. In fact, I sought them out often.
yeah.
Um, Now I really struggle to hear and listen and watch difficult things because of how deeply it affects me.
Mm,
So I'm not seeking out those experiences anymore. Obviously,
mm,
they're happening. Um, but yeah, in a way that feels much more natural and feels much more present. Um, and I guess I guess there's just been a slow sort of like increasing my comfortability with feeling vulnerable and feeling emotional. Um, and yeah, having emotional responses to things like
yeah.
when my when my rabbit died, I was absolutely devastated. Like you would, well, I would have thought, having seen me, that somebody really close to me had died. I've never experienced that before. When people die, I don't really miss people. I didn't really miss people. There was so much um disassociation
Yeah.
that I struggled to access those feelings. But yeah, now they're back. Very powerful.
Best thing, well, worst thing about healing, you get your feelings back. Best thing about healing, you get your feelings back. It's that kind of catch 22, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just want to touch on a little bit and just unpack that because I was smiling as you were talking about, the addiction to the high sensation, murder, crime, kind of, drama series and things. And I've journeyed that myself and still can flatline really easily to a serial killer binge on Netflix. Um, that disassociative element. And also what I learned is it's the pain body that we all have inside us is
Mm.
addicted. It seeks out pain, so it will seek out that kind of high sensation
Yeah.
drama. And actually I feel when we come from, and actually I think we're hard pressed in this day and age to meet anyone who hasn't experienced trauma, whether it is with a little t or a capital T in some way.
Yeah.
And I think and it's for the individual to define their own trauma. It can be very different for each person. But I think that pain body that exists in each of us will seek out these high sensation experiences.
Yeah.
And actually, if I'm honest, I think that a lot of these TV channels capitalize on that. It's a money-making exercise, and you can almost gauge, what's going on in the collective by the things that the TV channels are churning through. So it's almost hard to avoid falling into that pattern of behavior. But I was smiling because just last night I was speaking to a woman I support who was speaking about just this addiction to moving towards watching things that are really dark and that
Yeah.
make them feel bad, and how that can all wrap itself up in fantasy and darkness, and you can start to make that mean something about yourself. And yeah, we were talking about the pain body, so I was thinking how interesting it is because, well, we're always all moving through the same kinds of patterns of behavior, really. That's what I'm realizing the more people I speak to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
my attraction was, I think I wanted to feel something. I wanted to,
Mm,
I wanted that shock element
yeah.
because I did feel quite quite sort of just mid. No,
Numb.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, no real
Mm,
highs, no real lows. And it was trying to sort of encourage that
mm,
feeling almost. So unconsciously, obviously, this is not
yeah.
conscious. Yeah.
yeah, we become desensitized, and then the bar's set at a certain level, and then we have to seek something more and more and more high sensation. And you do see this manifest in so many different ways. And you can see this even in, sexual acts and things like that. So if we set the bar in a certain, and this is not a judgment on anybody's sexual preferences and how people want to behave in their sexuality, that's for each individual to explore. But I, for instance, have noticed that in myself. I'll speak for myself. In, when I was most disassociated and in a relationship with somebody at that time, I was seeking out, more and more and more kink, because for me, that was a way for me to feel. Because actually, in the act of having sex, I was so disassociated. And
Mm.
so, in order to feel, it was like, actually, can we maybe move towards inflicting some pain here? Because then I can feel, I'd set the bar so high around the disassociation. So, yeah, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
mm. And then you touched a bit on the grief, and I feel like that's such a, it's a huge topic that so many are moving through, a huge collective feeling and pattern that we're all moving through is to feel grief. And interesting how grief can also, the death of your pet, your rabbit, and it seems disproportionate, but actually, would it be your experience, as mine is, that grief will attach itself to new grief, and actually what we're feeling is a repeat of the old grief that hasn't really had the opportunity to be felt?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like a
Mm,
key. It was opened, it that opened up and allowed other grief to come through. But that sense of grief and the loss, I think um comes fairly often for me. I think
mm,
somebody once said to me that with all change comes loss.
yeah.
And I think that's really important to know, because sometimes even when we want that change, it doesn't mean there isn't going to be some pain and some grief with that change. Um, because the feelings can be very confusing as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I always sort of like to let people know that it's okay to grieve the old you, even if you didn't like it, or it's okay to grieve an old relationship, even though it was very toxic. There's certain elements of it that facilitated something that enabled you to cope, to manage, to get through. And it's like taking a crutch away that goes, and then you have to figure out how to walk again, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, absolutely. And I always come back to archetypal kind of viewpoints as well. And I always think of, a mother. I have a child, you have children. It's there can be parts about their behavior that you think, oh, goodness me, like this is a lot. And then we're moving through this phase, and this is a lot. And I'm not really sure if I really like this part that we're moving through, but you don't stop loving your child. And if we think about ourselves as, parenting ourselves continuously through our lifetime,
Mm.
y- it would be kind of remiss if we stop loving each version of ourselves that has grown, to this point. So for me, it's a constant case of trying to just be a parent to myself, trying to be loving to myself, not rejecting parts of myself. There's nothing more painful than rejection from a parent. Why would I do that to myself? You know? So it's about loving those previous parts of myself.
Definitely, that brings to mind compassion and having
Mm,
compassion for those different versions of yourself.
mm,
Um, and I can easily swing into being quite critical, quite hard on myself. And
yeah.
therapy has definitely helped me to stay curious and not be so damning, um, because that goes nowhere. It's a full
Mm,
stop. It's not expansive. So if I can have some compassion, some understanding of why I made decisions, why I chose that, why I stayed, those kind of things. It it's
mm,
it's it leads to me feeling better about myself, and yeah, just a deeper understanding of myself, really.
Yeah. And you just brought to mind, I think in understanding ourselves, we can understand others so much more effectively, you know. And one of the aspects I've always admired about you is, um, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've said this to you before, but like there would be this like moment where in a one-to-one situation where I would literally think, oh my God, you are looking into my soul and you can read my mind. There's just something about you in terms of, you know, genuine connection that, yeah, enables that. I've always found you to be deeply compassionate, actually, and understanding, you know, on my own journey, around my sexuality that started around about just over 4 years ago, I guess. I think we can count now. You were
Mm.
highly supportive and compassionate to me. You know,
Thank
you were
you.
right there.
I really feel
Um,
really feeling this. It's really feels really lovely. Thank you for that. And I think you know, something that we touched on here is judgment. The more self-compassionate we can be, the less judgment we are towards ourselves and others. And yeah, that has definitely kind of springs to mind when you're talking about what we were discussing. And yeah, we can be really harsh on ourselves and really judgmental, and sometimes it takes somebody else saying, you know, it's all right, it's okay. It's not, you know, that part of you is not something that needs to be shunned or shamed or
mm,
in a way.
yeah, absolutely.
But thank
Mm.
you for those strokes. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, did you enjoy those? So you're talking about strokes. Should we just touch a little bit on this path of learning that you're on at the moment? Would you be comfortable just to talk about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
So you're studying at the moment.
For my sins.
Tell us a little bit more. What are you
I
studying?
am. Yeah, so I'm studying to be a psychotherapist. I'm studying transactional analysis, which you started on the course with me on too. I hope I'm not giving away your
No,
secret.
no, you're good. Sorry, I'm an open book.
Um, and I love it. I love it because it really touches on that analytical, overthinking part of my brain that absolutely loves theory and learning and self-awareness. However, there is a flip side and there is some serious limitations with it.
Mm,
It definitely perpetuates a colonial system,
mhm,
a system that is designed for and by Western whiteness supremacy. Um, it's deeply problematic, deeply problematic. There are many, many things. Um, my the way I kind of resolve with my continued learning is that I I'm slightly stepped back often, and I'm able to see it for what it is. It feels like a gateway for me.
mm,
I feel I feel like I get to exercise my my kind of being a student again. I have some issues around authority. You might know this being on the course with me.
well, I think probably both as bad as each other, right? In that camp.
I have some issues around authority, but I also have some issues around feeling intelligent. For a
Mm,
very long time, I have felt unintelligent. Is that a word? Is it unintelligent,
No,
unintelligent?
I think unintelligent is correct. Yeah.
And that has been a story I've told myself. So um, I feel like this journey that I'm on in terms of the psychotherapy feels like, you know, slowly chipping away at that script that I've lived with forever. And so it feels like that's important, but I'm also aware of that's not the whole of my path in terms of healing, the way I want to practice therapy and supporting others in terms of their transformation and change.
Mm. Oh, so much juice in there. Where do I go? It's like you speaking about the structures and the, the colonialization of our therapeutic viewpoints and yeah, the paths to healing. And I think one of the things that came up for me throughout the process of this learning with transactional analysis was, but what gives this individual the right to claim this medicine, right? What actually, okay, so they've constructed a theory and they documented this thing, but ultimately, what we're talking about here is shadow work, and shadow work belongs to indigenous medicine keepers and is ancient. And one of the things that came up for me was, yeah, just this focus on it being quite a mind activity. Um,
Absolutely.
and knowing for me that the pathway to healing actually there's been a layer of access through creating stability in the mind enough for me to sit still, but actually most of my healing has come from the body. And yeah, as you know, I started the course with you, but decided it wasn't the right pathway for me, and I removed myself. And hearing you speak about it, I'll be honest, it makes me think, damn, have I done the right thing? But that's part of my pattern. I just accept that about myself. And what I do is I lean into my body and I'm like, yeah, I've done the right thing. Like my body tells me I've done the right thing. But what I observe about you and had the privilege of observing about you in class is that incredible ability that you have to, I think you spoke of it, almost satellite out. So is
Yeah.
it a gift of disassociation? Is it a gift of, becoming an observer to things and so it's just watching and being hyper vigilant? Who knows where this pattern comes from? But you do have an ability to satellite out and see
Mm,
a bigger picture and a
mm,
way of positioning things that's reflective and invites others to be reflective in dialogue. So yeah, I feel there's a natural, like an innate therapist in you.
mm.
That's
Thank
been my
you.
experience of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hmm, I agree with everything. And what I will say is that we're all different ultimately. And I feel
Mhm.
like me and you are slightly different in that maybe your access point is the feeling and my access point is the thinking, right?
Yeah.
And then we kind of move through whatever we're doing and that and yeah, different things are going to work for different people at different times.
Mhm.
This is working for me at the moment. And I really felt and heard your struggle with
Yeah.
the course and how it wasn't quite aligning with your values and also your inability to be able to sit in that sort of icky, unaligned kind of place, you know.
Yeah.
I got that. I feel like I went through it with you.
You did, babe. I'm really sorry about that.
That's okay. Because it was really interesting. Because it also, everything we go through as friends, as people who are connected, we all have a response to whatever everyone else is
Mhm.
going through too.
Yeah.
So you absolutely made me question lots of lots of things,
Mhm.
and think about the importance of the somatic and indigenous, colonial, anti-establishment,
mm,
kind of other ways of being. I think it's very important to remember that that is not the way,
yeah.
although the system will like to try and
Tell
tell us
us.
that's the way.
Mm,
But it definitely is designed just to uphold the status quo and the way things are done. And some could say that it perpetuates more harm than it
mm,
heals. But um, yeah, it's one modality, I think.
mm. Yeah, and I mean, interestingly enough, I've continued with my therapist and I'm having a great time, you know? So the supervision type therapy that I was experiencing, I've
Yeah.
continued. I found a great therapist and it was like, oh, do I carry on? And we had a whole conversation around it and I carried on and having major breakthroughs. And
Mm.
actually was given a beautiful perspective around some patterns that I was experiencing the other day where she helped me to see because we speak of in transactional analysis we speak about the child adult and parent ego states
Yeah.
and you touched on running scripts and yeah she was able to help me see that I have this overarching script of this thing is like this relationship dynamic is overwhelming to me and I need to really fix it and I was expressing how frustrating that is for me and she was able to help me see in a really visual way
Mm.
because now we're starting to know each other. She knows how I'm receptive to learn. And she explained that at the point that that pattern was ingrained for me as a child, she asked me how old was I when that first happened. And I said, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4. And she said, great. And she helped me to see that actually the reason it feels so overwhelming for me now as an adult is because in that moment when that script starts to run, I am that 3-year-old. So if you put yourself in the visual state of a 3-year-old, I'm here as a little 3-year-old down here looking up at the parental dynamic. It is huge. And I think something really clicked for me in that moment where I had this ability to see little me and
Mm.
have this huge amount of compassion for myself right now, today, in that of course it feels big, it is big, because I'm back there being little 3-year-old me, so it's given clarity and I think there's such a wonderful place for therapy in the
Mm.
spectrum of healing.
Mm.
And it's something that I've continued to use throughout my passageway to transformation, and probably always will in one way or another. Yeah.
Mm.
And I know you're going through the process yourself. What's your current experience with, your therapy process? How are you finding it?
How am I finding therapy? I've always enjoyed therapy. I've always enjoyed the reflections of
Mm,
somebody else. I think I think our relationship is quite therapeutic in that we invite reflect the other's reflection and
mm,
points of view, and we're very open, and you know we're willing to go to some dark places. Um, so I enjoy therapy a lot. It's the first time I've had a Black therapist, female
mm,
therapist, which feels incredibly significant. And this is the place I am in my healing, because race feels like something I'm ready to tackle finally. Um,
Ooh,
yeah, and that has been a place where I haven't been willing to go until recently. It's a big one. It's a really big one
mm,
for me, being mixed heritage. Um, I have really missed that kind of elder or person to guide or to reassure in terms
mm,
of my blackness, in terms of my whiteness, in terms of my mixedness. There's some big healing that needs to happen there, and
Mm,
we're slowly unpicking.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think there's something really, I think if I start to put the lens of your own journey of transformation that you're moving through, but how there's a consistent thread of how you move that into being of service to others. And I think a prime example of this is your group that you've set up, Black Enough.
Yeah.
So in that, quandary of who am I, what's my identity, you
Mm.
created community. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about Black Enough and that community that you've created?
Yeah, of course. So black enough stems from me not feeling black enough
Mm,
for most of my life, and really having limited connection with my blackness, having been sort of estranged from that side of my family.
mm,
Um, and I identified that I needed community. I needed companionship, and to not feel alone in this journey. And I think that's often my route to healing. It's often, if I talk about it, if I kind of gather people in,
mm,
that not feeling alone is so important to us, so important to us. And that has been what ultimately leads to me feeling better, to a change, a transformation. So yeah, it was just everything I do for other people is comes from a egocentric place of needing to heal that within myself. Um,
mm,
but also knowing that if I need it, then there's other people that do. So why
mm,
not share that and support others
mm,
while supporting myself? It just feels like a no-brainer to me.
mm.
Why would you
Yeah.
do healing on your own? Healing is about, I mean, we're social beings. We are designed to connect. We are all parts of one another. So sharing, healing, community, support, all of that is to me vital and absolutely necessary.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, it's interesting because the thing that stood out for me there as you were speaking is it comes from an egocentric place of healing myself. And actually, I think that's quite an interesting, and this is, I'm not to project, but as I absorbed that from you, what I took from that is I think there's almost an external factor that plays in there that makes us feel that it is egocentric to want to heal ourselves, to be in a process of self-reflection and self-exploration. Um, but ultimately, we are all responsible for healing ourselves, right? What else can it be but egocentric and unique to ourselves? Um, and what I love, I
Well,
guess, yeah, what I've noticed as being part of the Black Enough community, and that for me was huge to be invited into that community because
mm,
I, as you know, was struggling with my mixed heritage identity and being very white appearing as I saw myself, um, just feeling like I don't think I really belong in here. And we can all see the irony of that because I'm not black enough, and the group's called Black Enough, and it's just so. Um, but my experience of attending the event and sort of being there in the company of other women of mixed heritage identity was just an open-armed welcome and a sense of you're okay, like you can be here, and it's okay if this is where you're at the beginning of your journey, just starting to understand and find yourself with this part of you in this like grandfather and great grandfather's kind of story that has this Sudanese heritage, and it means nothing. I have no idea who I am, who that part of my family are. but I was still given permission to belong. And
Mm.
actually, it really was like a little piece of jigsaw that just went into place, and it meant so much. Yeah,
And isn't that significant? Because ultimately everyone just wants to belong.
yes.
We're all striving, we've all got that little child inside of us that feels like we don't belong, that feels like
Mm,
we're alone, and no one understands what it's like, the pain and yeah, there is, when I talked about the egocentric nature of my healing, I
mm,
didn't mean that in a disparaging way. I just
yeah,
meant
good.
that in terms of the way we see things as kids, because we
Mm,
literally do think that no one else is experiencing the same thing. And often when there's a quite a, a big amount of pain there, when that pain point, we still go back into that egocentric nature of
mm,
no one understands, I'm not black enough, I don't belong anywhere, and what I've noticed if I express how I feel from that very kind of childlike pain point, I realize that it's not reality. And therefore, that invites other people in to also express that and feel
mm,
like they can challenge that story.
mm,
But yeah, we do. We always we often go back into that childlike state when we are really struggling with something.
mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm just sort of bringing to mind all of the different ways that I mean, for me, building community is a huge asset. Let's call it an asset. It's a huge offering that innately seems to pour from you. So you've obviously built community, and I think and I hope you don't mind me touching on this, and you can tell me to shut up, but you've obviously had a huge online presence for a period of time, a significant period of time. And I think, am I right in saying you started out as a fashion blogger or something? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what we used to call you? So,
Uh,
and then Starmy Sunday, and it's kind of, you've built this platform. And I know that you're going through a huge transformational process at the moment in terms of that platform. Um, but yeah,
Again.
would you, again, every 4 years, right? But I've been following that journey. So I think our kids went to the same school. So I think I've seen at least two iterations of those 4 year processes, right?
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Maybe even touching on three now. So yeah, I guess I've seen the journey you've taken through these various processes and had the privilege of getting to know you better and better, probably more so recently than ever. And I see what a huge catalyst that is in terms of reaching others and helping them, creating a community and then taking that community or allowing that community to access information, learning points. You have, for instance, your healing. So you wrote a book. Would you tell us a bit about your book that you wrote?
Yeah. My book's called Feeling Myself. I was Natalie Lee then. Um, and it's about my sexual evolution, revolution, I guess you would say. But within the context of our society, I guess, and how much shame, especially as those born with wombs, are really sort of born into, um, and it was basically a book of exploration and peeling off the layers of shame, enabled to really be able to explore who I am, who I am sexually, who I'm attracted to, how I like to be touched, how I like to indulge in sexual activity. Um, yeah, just a kind of whole story and journey through that process was the book, through trauma as well. Yeah, that was pivotal for me, because again, you know, going back to the I'm not intelligent script, it was really powerful for me to feel like I have a book, you know, I'm an author. I can actually say I'm an author and take
Mm,
ownership in that. And also there's a lot of there's a lot of things that are done to us, or that we may have engaged in, voluntarily or not voluntarily, that we feel a
mm,
lot of shame and embarrassment and, um, yeah, pain around. And I feel like this book, I kind of like put all that shit in the book, and it really helped me to, take ownership of who I am, feel more
mm,
comfortable in being able to go into some dark spaces that I didn't think I was able to open the box of.
mm,
So yeah, it helped. It helped massively with, how I feel about myself, I guess.
mm,
I feel like I often use the kind of imagery of like shame is like that sort of, gremlin that hides in the corner of the room. It's always there, but you're like this, la 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 la, you know, you put your hands at the side of your head trying to not look, but it's still there. And
mm,
when it's still there, it follows you around. And, you know, I experience things like imposter syndrome, not feeling good enough, um, not feeling like I had a right to be there. Um, and the book really helped me kind of, shine a light on my gremlin and feel able to take up space. Yeah, it was
yeah.
good.
And it's a beautiful book. You know, having read it, the thing that really struck me was how many parallels there were in our journeys, as you know, and I think that has been one of the things that always amazes me. So you touched on it, and our access points are different. You maybe through thinking, me through feeling, but actually it's spooky actually how many parallels there've been in our private lives, you know, and our journeys to, yeah, to building the friendship that we have today. And yeah, I think that just again comes back to the point that you were saying, like we're never really alone. We think we're alone. We think we're so unique, special, and
Mm,
different. And actually, there's always so much commonality to be found. And I think with this podcast, one of my desires is to really highlight that. Like we all think we're alone. We all think we all need to fill this hole in the soul. And actually, yeah, everyone's on that journey in one way or another. We're all just trying to find the thing. We're all just trying to find ourselves. We're all trying to connect with something bigger than ourselves. And
yeah.
actually, there are lots of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just hope, in a sense, this becomes a forum for that and a community for finding those access points, you know?
Oh, for sure. Whenever
Mm,
we talk, whenever we're vulnerable, whenever there's connection, it always invites people in, doesn't it? And to find commonality.
mm,
But something you were saying whilst you were talking kind of sprang to mind. You know, sometimes I have to remind myself, you're not really that fucking special. You're not that different. You're just
no.
like everyone else, even though you might think you are. And that, that helps me. It might sound horrible, but that helps to bring me down sometimes from being up in the air and thinking that
Yeah.
the world revolves around me. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Um, and sometimes you know, our ego gets into a space
Mm,
of things won't happen if I'm not part of it, or, I can't take a break because I'm far too important to this,
yeah.
and that it's not the case. It is
Mm,
not the case. And sometimes we have to bring ourselves back down to earth a
mm,
little bit.
yeah.
Course, of course, you're special to yourself, to
Mm,
the people who are around you. but there's such a that has to be balanced with
mm,
we're actually just like everyone else. We've
mm,
all got the same old shit happening, and we've all got love and wonderful things, you know.
mm,
And you're right, there's so much more that we have in common than we
mm,
have that separates us. And
mm.
it's important to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best things that in my recovery process, one of the best things that I encountered somebody who was supporting me along my journey, and I'd hit a bit of a sort of a mini rock bottom in that process. One of the things he said to me is, I think you're taking yourself a bit too seriously, sis, you know? And I remember at the time thinking it was literally like he'd smacked me around the face with a wet fish. I was indignant. I thought, what? And that absolutely proved the point, you know? It was like, just lighten the fuck up, will you? You know, and I think that was really great advice. And yeah, like realizing we aren't the be all and end all. And as you say, we can remove ourselves from a dynamic and the world doesn't end. It's okay to take care of ourselves and put our needs up front and center. And I want to talk a little bit about Healing Myself, the community that you run.
Mm,
Because from Feeling Myself, you then grew the Healing Myself community. So, and I know this is open to people to join. Would you
yeah.
tell the listeners a little bit about it?
Yeah. I think the reason I started it again came from a need in me,
Mm,
needing to heal and wanting to bring other people in along that journey too. Um, and yeah, healing is multifaceted for me. Um, and it has to happen on so many different levels in order for there to be sustainable change. Um, and it was about sharing the new things that I'm learning, the new tools in my box in order to rummage around, you know, when needed. And again, that sharing that helps cement that in my
mm,
own healing and supports others too.
mm. Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
that's what it's about really. I just there's a Facebook group, there's I send out regular emails, sometimes do workshops, online workshops, and also occasionally do one-to-ones with people who just need a little bit of a chat, really. So yeah,
Mm,
it's just building that support network again and community.
amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess we've sort of touched on some of the pieces that you offer. Is there anything else that you've got up your sleeve that you're kind of excited to birth or to bring forward at the moment?
Um, I'm thinking about my second book. I'm thinking
Mm,
about that a lot and where that goes. Um, just thinking about that.
mm.
How much I talk about that. I think probably I'll keep that close to my chest at the moment
Yeah.
because who knows where it's going to go.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, that's something I'm thinking about. I'm doing lots of festivals this year, talks,
mm,
healing circles. Um, yeah, there's for me, there's a big movement in terms of supporting um, other minorities and people who aren't white, and just
mm,
I feel like there's still a real need to do some active anti-racism work. Um,
yes.
there's there's still quite a lot of laziness around that and a lack of responsibility. So that for me is something I'm really interested in highlighting and
Mm,
supporting.
yeah. Yeah. And I think really important to mention just the amount of advocacy that you offer and allyship and the activism and what a fantastic role model you are for just standing in your truth and actually, yeah, really embracing yeah, the part of you that just wants to stand on the right side of justice, regardless of the personal cost. So having observed that about you recently in terms of political standpoints around Palestine and how you've been using your platform as a platform for change, yeah, much admiration for you.
Thank you.
Mm.
And that goes back to you too. I see both of us as people who are truth seekers and
Hmm.
are not afraid of speaking up and putting our
Yes.
head above the parapet and occasionally getting whacked on the head with it, you know. But
Occasionally, yeah.
also we're very honest and we aren't afraid of using our voices. And that's really scary for a lot of people.
Yes.
They're I know I know how easy it is to demonize women who are unafraid, who are able to use their voices, who are brave in speaking truth. That's that's a really scary thing in our society. A
Yeah.
really scary thing. So
Mm.
yeah, um, kudos to you too.
Gratefully accepted. And that's a whole other podcast, right? So we've talked a little bit how people can reach out to you, and I'll make sure that we've got some links and some pieces available in the bio for you. I'd love to finish. What I've been doing is speaking to guests and sort of asking, I guess, for some reflections. So if the listener is coming to listen to this podcast from a place of accessing healing, wanting to support themselves in on pathway of healing, I'd love to ask, what would you say to those individuals if you could give them a nugget of advice or a suggestion?
Um, I would um I would say silence the noise. I think that's
Mm,
probably the most important thing. I'm very, very, very um, I'm very anti-guru business.
mm,
So I don't think you should be following somebody in terms of just believing everything they say is true, following them, exactly doing what they tell you to do, including myself, which is
mm.
why I feel uncomfortable giving
Love
advice.
that.
So my non-advice advice is
Love it.
to shut everyone else out, to take moments to go within and to figure out exactly what it is that you need, because that is going to be different for everyone
Mm,
at different times. I can't tell anyone how to heal
mm,
themselves. Only
mm.
they can do that for themselves.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's ultimately all that I do. I I share my stuff. I'm vulnerable, and hopefully that will empower you to be able to do something similar or different. It might just
Mm,
stimulate a thought, whatever it is. But you're not going to do it in the way that I've done it because
mm,
it's different. But you'll find some commonalities as we've discovered.
mm. And I guess did that answer the question of anybody who's interested in becoming a space holder? So you've already said, and I think it touches on like idolatry and like placing somebody in this position of guru and like superior to yourself. And I think one of the reasons I've always chosen really to identify more as a mentor is I'm only a bit further along on the path and I'm showing you the way. And I'm not, I'm not a leader in any way.
Mm,
Never want to be. I want the people that work with me, I want them to be responsible for their own healing. They're
mm,
only accessing parts of themselves that perhaps they're not aware exist, and I can help them to unveil them, to release those pieces. But if somebody were looking to hold space in the way that absolutely maybe you are, would you have any reflections for them, or would it be a case of as you've done it, like you've said, I just do the thing and then I show people how I've done it?
Anyone who wants to hold space in the way that I have done.
Mm.
Um, can you give
Well,
me
I
a
don't think
more
it's, and it's
specific?
not necessarily in the way that you've done. If there's anyone out there who wants to follow a path of being able to hold space for others, would you have any suggestions for them?
Oh, okay. What's worked for me is just sharing my stuff, just being vulnerable, being
Mm.
brave, um, allowing yourself to show up imperfectly.
Oh,
And yeah, shining a light on those dark corners and recesses of our soul that might feel like a natural instinct to hide away, but actually that's the stuff that really resonates with people. That's the stuff
mm,
that other people are inspired by and empowered by. So I work intuitively always.
mm,
Always, always, always. Have never ever had a plan. I've never had a schedule. I've tried, and it has never ever worked. Um, I am moved by things. I'm moved in directions of things, and sometimes those things have been not so good for me choices, but
mm,
there's been learning in whatever they have given me.
mm,
And yeah, I feel very honored to be me. I feel very, very grateful to be in conversation with you and in connection with everyone that's around me. Um,
mm,
and for all of those lessons.
mm,
It's all just a slow learning, understanding, finding meaning, whatever the fuck that means, you
mm.
know.
Yeah, and that willingness to get vulnerable, right? It's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
our own healing and in our facilitation. Thank you so much. Do you
Hmm.
feel complete?
Will I ever feel complete?
I
No.
knew you were going to say that. Let's hope not. I never want to be complete. Let's always be on this journey, just seeking and seeking more and more transformation. I just think it's the most
Exactly.
wild ride to be on.
Exactly. But I did enjoy our conversation. I really
Mm,
enjoyed that conversation. So thank you for asking me questions, for inviting me on, and for allowing me to, yeah, have my moment on your podcast.
absolutely. Such a privilege to have you. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, full of gratitude for you and much, much love.
Thanks, Claire.